Hey everybody, this is John Upchurch, aka Sitecore John, aka Gravy Train, here for a quick demo on how to get started using Docker and Sitecore. So first we needed to talk about a couple of things with regards to the compatibility of Docker and different versions of Windows. So Windows 10 will generally run Docker just fine. You have to be able to run or enable Hyper-V and have the hyper-threading enabled in order for Docker to run. And then you can run Docker Desktop and everything is pretty straightforward. If you're trying to run it on a Windows Server instance, and mind you, some of these things are just based on my own experience and my struggles. I don't know if absolutely everything here is. There may be workarounds or ways to approach some of this that I just haven't encountered, but it works. What I'm going to show you should work. So ultimately, that's really what I'm kind of making these videos for. There's definitely some good content out there, but Docker is a complicated animal, and it can be really frustrating to try to get started with. So I'm hoping that maybe I can save you some of that pain. So with Windows 10, like I said, as long as you have Hyper-V installed and enabled, you should be fine. You can just install Docker Desktop. And you'll get everything that you need. On a Windows Server, which is a lot more of a useful place if you're not just using it for dev, or if you're working in dev VMs or something like that, which is pretty common nowadays, you're going to need to do a couple of extra things and bear a few things extra in mind. So I actually start with a Windows, and I'm working from a VM in Azure, and I start from a Windows Server 2019 instance. If you actually search the Docker or the marketplace on Windows Azure, there is a Docker Engine 2019 VM that you can deploy out, and it will have Docker Enterprise and everything set up just for the basic Docker and all of that. It'll be ready to go. So you won't have to worry about installing Docker. You can always install Docker Enterprise yourself, but that's kind of the simplest way as far as that stuff goes. So that's kind of where we're starting from. I just have Docker installed here, and nothing else. So I've got this PowerShell ISE here, which has my kind of starting or my setup script for any new environment in this setup. And I'm going to kind of walk through it. I'm not going to just run it here because I want to talk through what each step here is doing and what you're actually getting from it and what's happening so that you have a bit of understanding about it. So first, I use Chocolatey, and a number of other people do too. A lot of the tutorials about kind of getting started with this stuff involve using Chocolatey. It's a great package management tool for Windows or software management tool from the command line. So you can simply, it starts by setting your execution policy, that's your script execution policy, to bypass mode. So that is going to allow you to execute this remote script. So I'm just going to copy these lines. Actually, yeah, I can execute just, you don't want to run this in ISE. So I'm going to copy this, paste it over here, and yes to all. Oops. And it's going to install Chocolatey here. And then what it's going to do, import, didn't it not get all of this command? Alright, so it got that. We'll go ahead and get this full command here. Matter of fact, we're going to get their last couple of things here. So this is basically just so this can run as a script. and not have to, you're not going to have to close and reopen the environment. So this refreshes the environment so that you can just continue running. Normally when you install Chaco, they say, oh, you're probably going to have to open your command prompt. This will make it so that you don't have to do that, and it can just keep going. And then this line here, this allow global confirmation, this just means that it's not going to prompt you every time that you try to install something, so you can just kind of keep going without issue. It's not going to prompt you for permission. So assuming that you know what you actually want to do. So now this is a clean install. It does not have Git. So we're just going to install Git. And it's that simple. This will download, set up, and install Git. And everything you need is going to be there. It's going to go through and do all that stuff. You don't have to open a browser or anything else. So it's really beneficial using Chocolate. This next one, while that's kind of installing, is this is going to create your Powershell profile, which is a script that is run every time you start Powershell. So this will allow you then to preload all of your environment variables that you're going to need. I mean, some of these things, well, you're gonna want to have them. So we actually, you'll need your Sitecore credentials, your user, and your password in order to pull down the Sitecore images and build them yourself. So we're gonna we're gonna create the profile, and that'll be here. And this command just forces this profile to be made. Now you can always reference that profile by using the profile variable. So, and you can see I have an empty profile right here. What I'm going to want to do is take these variables that I have, copy them here, and paste them in here. Save that. And that just makes it simpler, so I don't have to look back and forth for passwords and anything else. Now, I've in addition to just the Sitecore credentials, I've also got a registry set up. So for all of our stuff here, we use a Docker container repository on Azure. So it basically, instead of having to, because you would have to build each of these on this machine or on a new machine, but this we only have to build it once, and we just pull down the images we need instead of having to build many other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and run these commands here, just so that we get those involved. Now I'm going to create a working folder. And I'm refreshing the environment now. And what this will do then is Git will now be ready and working, and all that other stuff, once again, without having to close and reopen the PowerShell container or window. So now I'm going to clone the repository, which it's just done. So you can see now there's a Docker images folder. And we've got everything here from the repository we've cloned. Now, once again, normally you would just run the script and everything would be done for you, with the exception of the content of this being put into your profile. That's easy enough to wire up, but it's also easy enough just to copy and paste it in there. So now we're going to set, and I've already copied the license into this path. So we're going to basically just set this license environment variable. There's other ways to do this as well, but I think for the script setup, this is the only way to do it, or it has to be there by default. And then finally, so at this point here, we would be next running this script. So, and let's make this a little bigger here. So let's examine what's going on here with the script. So build.ps1 I'm just going a little crazy. All right, so we've got this build.ps1 here. And what this is going to do is this is going to, I'm assuming you have some basic info about what Docker is and how it works, but a minor thing here is that basically Docker is a series of containers that you can add to by adding more containers. So it's kind of like a layered setup. And what this does, since they don't actually build out a complete separate version for every single combination of whether or not you're using XM or XP or XC or with SXA, with JSS, with SPE, with the publishing service, like all those different combinations, you're looking at a lot of stuff. So instead they do the smart thing and they have images that represent the core stuff, which is just the standard Sitecore install, XM, XP, XC. And then it gets layered on the extra pieces. So what the build is doing is it actually builds for you using all the different pieces, the images that you actually need. Now, the script here that runs, you're going to basically narrow down your criteria about what you want to install or define what you want to pull down and build. But ideally what you would end up doing, and I'll kind of talk about this in a future video, is you want to set these things up on a registry so that you only need to pull down exactly what you need. They already exist. You don't need to build it or anything else. So what this is actually doing here, the script anyways, is build.ps1. You're going to pass in your Sitecore username, and that's why we stored that into variable here. You're going to store your Sitecore password, or pass in your Sitecore password. So this isolation mode behavior. This is the important big difference about how you're going to potentially solve some issues with Docker and the version of Windows you're running, whether you're running a server or whether you're running a desktop OS, something like that. So if you were on a normal Windows 10 physical machine, not a VM or anything like that, an actual physical instance, or generally if you're on Windows 10 anyways, you're going to want to be able to, you can't even run Docker Desktop without Hyper-V installed. And that's kind of a big pain, especially when you're going out on Azure. You can technically enable the Hyper-V service on an Azure instance, but it's much simpler just to say that you're going to use the older version of the virtual machine management. So the isolation mode, whether it's Hyper-V or process or something else, it determines how Windows handles the container. So this is saying that for Windows Server, we are going to set the isolation mode behavior to force process isolation. So this eliminates the need to have Hyper-V installed or mess around with any of that extra stuff. And there may be ways around all this stuff. Like I said, I am not the preeminent Docker expert by any stretch. But this works. You set it to force to process and you eliminate the entire problem with having to deal with Hyper-V. Also, it's not like there's a big downside to doing this. Like you're setting up instances. This isn't going to change performance or anything else. So you're setting it to force process, the topology. So now you're saying which sets of images do I want to build? Maybe you just need the XM. Maybe you just need the XP. Maybe you need XC. Maybe you need everything. By default, the script will install XM and XP. Oops. By default, it's going to install XM and XP unless you specify otherwise. So if you want just XP, you can do that. But this is the format. If you want to add XC, the Sitecore or the Commerce builds, you can do XC, anything along those lines. So this then, the include SPE, means that you're telling the build script that you want to include all of the variations that have the Sitecore Powershell extensions built in. Now those are the images that just have Sitecore Powershell extensions without having SXA or JSS. So you're going to get separate builds that are vanilla Sitecore with Sitecore PowerShell extensions installed. The include SXA means you're going to get instances that have SXA installed. And now SXA includes SPE. So remember that if you're building an instance, and when we look at the images that get created here, remember that you're going to have SXA is going to include SPE. But if you want to have them separate, then you've got those as well. Then you've got include JSS. So if you want to have images that have JSS, it will include those. If you have both SXA and JSS, here, like I do, you're going to get instances that have just SXA. You're going to have instances that have just JSS, and you're going to have instances that have both SXA and JSS. And minus R. Oh, okay. So that's not actually a thing you're going to need. So basically there's a script command you can add on to this that allows you to, once you've built these things, it'll actually deploy the images out to a registry. You don't actually have to do that as part of this. You can do that separately. And I will talk about that in the episode that we go over the registries, which will probably be next video. So now then, so basically what this is going to do is this is going to build all those combinations of images. It's going to pull the stuff down. It's going to build it all. This is going to take generally a minimum of several hours. I mean, I've seen it take 3 or 4 sometimes. Generally, though, it's like 2 to 3. So I'm not going to do that in this video. And I've already got the registry set up, so I wouldn't need to do this on a new instance. But this is what you're going to need to have in order to pull this stuff down. And then finally, I make sure that Docker Compose gets installed, because on the Enterprise edition of Docker, that is not automatically installed. And it's a separate thing than just the Docker instance. So that is getting set up here, and then that's it. So now what you're going to see is, and we'll go back to just this. So the way that you're going to be able to test this stuff is actually, I'm not going to have the images to pull down, so I'm going to have to make some quick changes to the configuration so that it'll use the registry. So stand by for some quick time-lapse magic. Okay, so this .env file, let's actually go into, well, first let's navigate to where all the test scripts and everything are. So I'm going to go into from the Docker images where we executed the build script, and this is something you would do after you've already run the build script, is cd windows, and you're going to go into tests, and then you're going to go into whatever version. I'm just going to do 9.3 here. And now we've got a whole bunch of Docker Compose files in here. And these are basically set up to allow you to test out and make sure that things are working. So you'll notice that there is this .env file here. This is where you set up the environment variables that the Docker Compose files use. So this is all straight out of the default Sitecore stuff. So the Sitecore license will be handled by the command that we did earlier that sets the license path, although the license path is here, so whatever. The process isolation is a result of, actually, I'm not even sure how, it must automatically have done process isolation for these. even though I didn't tell it to. So, yeah. Anyhow, sorry, it's distracting myself here. So this environment file exists. Now, because I'm using the registry that I've already done, instead of having to build all the stuff first and have them on this machine, because that's not ideal because it takes way more time. I've set up this, I've filled in this value is normally empty. I've plugged in the URL for our Docker instance. And one thing you're probably going to want to do as part of your profile then is you're going to need to log in to this registry before you can actually use it. So this is here and it's saved, so it will actually use that stuff, but I have to log into the registry before I can use it. And that's as simple as Docker login, and it's going to want to do dash U, and that's one of the reasons why I do these variables is I don't have to remember any of the stuff. Minus P, and then the URL. So those are the arguments, and then all you need to do is give it the URL. And it succeeded. So that's why I have you put this stuff into the profile, because it just makes things simpler. So it's gone ahead and logged in. So now it should be able to use the registry that I put into the environment variable. So we're just going to spin up, we'll just spin up an XM because it's simpler. We'll spin up an XM with SPE. So normally, and we'll go into how you would use this within a project or a solution. The command has actually become simpler because there's conventions. You can just type docker compose, and if the file is called dockercompose.yml, it'll just run. But we're going to need to specify a couple of extra arguments here. So docker compose minus F for you're specifying a file name, and then .xm.spe. And the convention with these images, or with how they build up the images, these are not images, these are Docker Compose files, but the convention is that it is the topology dot and then whatever configurations, that it be SXA JSS or just SXA or just SPE or whatever your configuration is, and then file extension. And then the actual Docker Compose command is typically Docker Compose up or down or stop or whatever. You're giving an instruction now. So we're going to compose up. And then we're going to minus D, and that is going to put things in detached mode. So basically, if you were to run this without the minus D, the console is going to become the standard out for your instance or for your container. And we want to be able to kind of do other things with this container. So we're going to just run this, and you can see, so because I specified the registry, it's pulling things down from the registry directly. Each one of these images, it's going to pull down. It's not going to pull down, if it's already got the image, it's not going to pull it down again. So this saves you time, lots and lots of time about having to build all these images, because the build script has to, I mean, it's going to pull things down from the Sitecore registry for all this stuff. I mean, you're not going to necessarily be pulling down multiple copies there either, but this just means that you're only going to get exactly what you need for this. And this is really nice because you can, once you start using this within a project, which, like I said, we'll go onto in the next video, is you can just drop these into a project, run Docker Compose, and you're getting exactly what you want, and you're ready to go. So we're trying, the idea and the big draw on this stuff for me is that it's really speeding up I mean, anybody that's been doing Sitecore for a while knows, especially Sitecore 9, it can be a pain in the butt to get it installed and set up and running and configured. You can get it be up and running in minutes. So I'm going to let this run and then come back when it finishes. This will probably only take about 10 minutes, which is much better than the several hours. So stand by. We'll be right back when this finishes. Okay, so as you can see, we've gone through and it's downloading all of the images, or it's done downloading the images. And now it is spinning up the Solar instances and the CD, the CM, etc. So we are at a point where we are almost done. It will take just a moment, and there we are. So from here, if you want to see, there's a couple of commands to see what's going on. Docker PS will tell you what all of the Docker running processes are. So this container ID is just a unique ID for the container. The image, this is basically a tag, which has the repository and then the image name built into it. When it was created, and also you can see the ports that it's using. So if you want to be able to open up the web page or something like that, you need to append these ports or have something set up to map the ports. And then the name. So you can see this is the CM, the CD, etc. So I should be able to just go to localhost 4401. That's fine. And then give this the usual amount of time for Sitecore to spin up. And we should see the default Sitecore loading screen. Now, there's nothing special that you have to do with localhost in order to get these to work. And if you don't have a firewall running, you can get to these from the outside as well, from the internet at large. There's nothing special that you have to do other than making sure that your firewall is open. Now, you are still going to need to use the ports. We'll talk about ways to get around having to use the ports later on, but this is Sitecore running inside of here. And we can log into the CM side of things. The default admin B. And we've got Sitecore up and running. So this is as easy as it is to get started using Docker. Now, once you're done, let me go over a few things about where things are stored and all of that. So the data folder here, these are folders within the file system that are used to store the persisted data inside of the Sitecore instances. So the instances themselves don't save anything, which is good and by design. You can make all your changes here. So, for example, we go into Solar, you'll see all the Solar indexes here. You go into SQL, and you see the databases here. So that's kind of how this stuff works, just from kind of getting started standpoint here. Anything you copy in here will be available mapped into the instance. We'll go over a bit about how all the Docker Compose files map these files, but I just wanted to make sure you understood that these exist here, and that's kind of what's going on. This clean data, so all of these, because they're all started from the same place, mapped to the same data folder, they're all going to share data. So your SQL server, or your SQL databases, your indexes, and all of that, those all share the same data. So this clean data script allows you to scrub the data that's in there and start fresh. And these will persist between bringing these instances up and down until you run clean data. So just bear that in mind. That can be both beneficial, and it could be something you need to bear in mind to remember to clean it out. So now, because, like I said, I just pulled down the images, I can run Docker images, and you can see I've only got these 4 images installed here. Now, if I were to spin up an XP instance, you would then have all of the additional instances that are for XP, which I guess would be all of them for this, because these are all only XM. So you would see the XP ones here, but you're only going to have what you need. As opposed to, like, if you were to look at the machine that I used to build up all those instances or all those images and push them out to our registry, container registry, this list would be several pages long. So using the registry, getting that set up, is really a lot more efficient and is going to speed things up for you immensely. It's literally been, like, I've been talking on and off for about an hour, waiting for things to run with a couple of pauses. So not even that long, probably more along the lines of like 30 or 35, 40 minutes. But anyhow, it's pretty rapid, and you can automate much or all of this, and I will provide the scripts and all of that stuff for you in the description. I'll post some gists or something like that to allow you to get started. Now, as simple as it is to bring things up, then to bring things down, you can run the same command. Whatever the instance that you use to spin up, like if I were to spin up additional instances using a separate project name or something like that, I would need to run the same Docker compose. But I'm just going to do down instead of up. Oops, it helps if I don't typo that. And it's going to stop all the instances for all of the containers. And then it removes them. So now there are no running containers, but the images are still here. So it won't need to bring them up again, or I won't need to download them again when it goes next. And the data is still there until we run clean data. So there you go. That's kind of end-to-end getting started with Sitecore and Docker. I tried to put this into such a way that if you've struggled with the kind of complexity, you can just kind of start here. This will get you going. I'm going to go into more detail. Once again, I'm not the preeminent expert at Docker with Sitecore or Docker in general by any stretch, but I don't need to be. I am just hoping that I can help you get started and there's a lot of documentation out there on just Docker. There's a good bit on Docker Compose, and then there's plenty on Sitecore and stuff like that. Not a lot that actually brings it all together. So hopefully this has helped. If it has, consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate you liking the video. It's going to help grow the channel. And let me know in the comments if there was anything else that you wanted to see, or if this is helpful, or if you had questions or suggestions or anything like that. I am looking forward to interacting and creating a bunch more content here. So yeah, do all that YouTube stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great day.